Isn't it cool? I love that.
Please.
And they're like.
Take a sit. See, there's some seats over there.
When was that?
A few years ago.
In this.
Right.
Isn't it cool? I love that.
Okay, go ahead, Sadie.
I've never felt more.
We don't have to turn
It
on.
is.
Thank you. I would like to call the operations work group meeting to order. It is January 22nd, 2024. I believe we have 8 public speakers, all virtual. And let's get started.
And nothing, computer, but.
Your immunity.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I've done this.
Whenever you're ready.
All right. So we are here today from West Memorial and La Follette High Schools to urge this board to prioritize sustainability in its facilities and to achieve the district's renewable energy goals of 50% by 2030, 75% by 2035, and 100% by 2040. MMSD can do this. My 5th grade teacher always told us, when you're stuck in a hole, the first thing to do is stop digging. For our district, that means, unlike with the 2020 referenda, no new fossil fuel infrastructure in our schools. It means not cutting solar panels and electric charging stations from the 2020 referenda, and it means not passing another budget without major renewable energy projects. MMSD can do this. We recognize that meeting the renewable energy goals requires a large upfront investment, but this is possible. The Inflation Reduction Act covers 30 to 70% of the cost of wind, solar, and geothermal projects and provides at least $40,000 per electric school bus. While the vast array of funding opportunities may seem daunting, MMSD can hire a sustainability manager and launch an advisory committee to spearhead these efforts. Plus, MMSD should initiate a referendum to raise the remaining sums, which it will quickly make up for in savings. MMSD can do this. Tonight, you'll be asked to consider adjusting your renewable energy goals. We beg that you reject even entertaining this idea. Instead of wasting time arguing about goals, work on how you can move towards them. Rather than delaying the necessary transformation of our school district and locking in another period of planet-destroying emissions, please just focus on starting to get to 100% renewable energy. As you will soon discuss, the fossil fuel HVAC systems in our facilities are in terrible shape. So initiate a referendum for November to replace all of these old-fashioned systems with electric ones, supported by IRA-funded geothermal heat pumps. Approve the LED lighting project and install solar energy and electric charging at all facilities. With the help of an engaged community, the Inflation Reduction Act, and a referendum in 2024, MMSD can do this. The climate crisis is worsening, and we as students will be forced to contend with the worst of it. We are here tonight instead of studying for finals tomorrow because our futures are on the line. Over 800 MMSD high school students signed this letter demanding climate action now because their futures are on the line. Not only can MMSD hit 100% renewable energy, but MMSD must hit 100% renewable energy. Our futures are in your hands. If anyone would like a copy.
Yes, I would love one.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Judith Sadler.
Thank you. My name is Judith Stadler and I live in Fitchburg. The small children who live in my neighborhood ride the school bus to Aldo Leopold Elementary School. My own 4 grandchildren live in Madison and have attended Thoreau, Cherokee, and Madison West High School. I am a member of the 100% Renew MMSD group that sent you 4 recommendations in advance of your November work group meeting when you first discussed the long-range facilities plan. Today, I want to encourage you to stay the course with respect to the district sustainability commitments. I see on the PowerPoint today for today's meeting that there is, quote, tension between costs to achieve the BOE renewable energy goal by 2040 and addressing most urgent facility needs given limited state funding, end quote. A later slide says, quote, sustainability. Does the BOE want to consider any adjustments to the BOE renewable energy goal of 2040? End quote. In my opinion, it would be a terrible mistake to adjust downward the board's renewable energy commitment. The long-range facilities plan draft tells us that some district buildings must be renovated, and the plan specifically addresses HVAC systems in those buildings. The district should incorporate sustainability at every opportunity as facilities upgrades are designed. First up, please don't stop plans to install solar and EV charging on the high schools being renovated as part of the 2020 referendum. This is absolutely the right time to do sustainability upgrades. Federal benefits are available to assist with solar installations and electric HVAC upgrades to buildings over the next 10 years through the Inflation Reduction Act and other federal energy programs. Thank you for listening. I hope you will recommend staying the course.
Thank you, Judith. Our next speaker is Bryn Dixon Crouch.
Jesse, do let me in when you get a chance.
Hello.
Hi.
The integration of sustainability into our school's infrastructure is of the utmost importance to your constituents. Sustainability is integral in the accomplishment of your aims, not just your 2040 renewable energy goal, but also the objectives of preserving stability in schools, maintaining a long-term perspective of facility to address the needs of MMSD students, and furthering equity. Additionally, I want to emphasize that we do not need adjustments to the 2040 renewable energy goal. Frankly, I find it appalling that we are even entertaining this idea. It's important to focus on action. Whether or not the goal gets accomplished by exactly 2040 is less important. Rather, what is paramount is putting in a concerted effort to and putting forth projects to further the aim of sustainability and move towards a livable future. An example would be electrifying the school's HVAC systems as opposed to continuing to invest in fossil fuel infrastructure, implementing solar energy, and improving the LED light bulbs. Now is the time to be brave and bold, not back down.
Thank you. Next up is Allison Johnson.
Hi, I'm Allison Johnson. I'm a junior at La Follette and I'm a part of the La Follette Green Club. When thinking about the present and the future, utilizing renewable energy sources in Madison schools is important. Renewable energy will help MMSD lower their CO2 emissions, contributing less to the ongoing climate crisis. As for the future, moving to renewables will require less reliance on limited resources that will eventually run out. And as a student, that's very important to me, that MMSD does all they can to support future generations of students and give them the opportunities they need.
Thank you. Next is Rowan Tress.
My name is Rowan Tress. I'm from West High School, and I talk before you despite having a calculus class tomorrow at 8 a.m. because I know that this is a time-sensitive matter as sustainability is. To be frank, I am annoyed that I have to be up here. When I heard that MMSD was working on initiatives to make our schools eco-friendly, I was elated. And here I am, after multiple failed promises of sustainability, still advocating for things to be approved. I am tired of excuses that hinder immediate action to implement solutions to solve the climate crisis. The main concerns are cost, which I find very silly, given how study after study has shown that these sustainable practices will save MMSD millions of dollars. And honestly, if this initiative costs us trillions of dollars, I know that I, along with my classmates, would still be up here fighting for our future. We owe it to the earth, and right now we have the opportunity to actually make a change. Over 800 MMSD high schoolers have signed a petition demanding climate action. For the sake of us, the middle and elementary schoolers, and the future children, both students at MMSD and around the world, stop making excuses and improve sustainable plans. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lydia Siam.
Hello everyone, my name is Lydia and I'm part of the Bell Phillips Memorial. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight regarding the long-term plans for sustainability within the Madison School District. We would like to ask you, the Board of Education, to commit a sustainability plan by the end of the 2023 to 2024 school year to achieve the goals set by the board in 2019. The Board of Education has pledged to have 50% of energy used by the district be from renewable sources by 2030, as well as 75% by 2035 and 2040. This can only be accomplished by instituting a plan as soon as possible. There should be a clear plan that would support significant directions on what is needed to be achieved these goals on a year-by-year basis. Please consider having the sustainability committee to help create the action plan, as well as an energy manager to lead all operations, logistics to update school buildings that support sustainability goals. Please let us know how we as student green teams at our schools can help with the planning and work ahead to invest in sustainability across our district.
Thank you. Next is Adele Lockwood.
Hey everyone, my name is Adele Lockwood and I'm a member of the Bell Phillips Memorial High School Green. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight about the sustainability. As current students in the MMSD school district, we felt it was important to show up to tonight's board meeting to demonstrate to you all how important these sustainability goals are to us. We will be living with the effects of climate change for the rest of our lives. And the more we can improve and change our systems to renewable energy, the better off everyone will be. The board had pledged to have 50% of the district's energy come from renewable resources by 2030, 75% from renewable sources by 2035, and 100% by 2040. The only way to achieve this plan is to set a plan in place. It is essential that the board moves forward with a plan that will help the district become more sustainable, not only ecologically, but also economically. Despite the large upfront costs, the long-term investment of sustainable energy sources for the district would help reduce energy costs in the future. There are several ways to institute green energy into the district already, starting with replacing the outdated HVAC systems with ones that run on renewable energy instead of natural gas. Replacing the lighting systems within schools by substituting in LED lights for standard ones would also help decrease the district's energy uses. We were incredibly disappointed to see that the referendum cuts included cutting funding towards solar panels, and we urge you to not move forward with this. Decreasing funding towards sustainability now, while not having a clear plan on how we are going to get the district to run solely on renewable energy by 2040, will not help us. We as students of MMSD request a clear plan before the end of the school year regarding how the district is going to turn its sustainability goals from a commitment to a reality, so that we may combat this climate crisis before it becomes irreversible. Thank you for your time.
Our final speaker is
Hi, everybody. My name is Ellie, and I'm the current president of the Bell Phillips Memorial High School Green Club. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with y'all tonight about the board's resolutions for renewable energy. It is really important to us as students that we share with you how important sustainability is to us and to support the climate change goals previously set by the district in 2019. We feel it is important to similarly express to you the sense of urgency we feel as students regarding climate change. The current set goals for the district are to have 50% of the energy consumed by the district be from sustainable sources by 2030, 75% by 2035, and 100% by 2040. These goals are ambitious and achievable, but not without a plan being set into place. As you discuss these goals tonight, we would like to ask you to develop and institute a plan before the end of this school year to reach these sustainability goals. It has already been 5 years since the resolution goals were passed, and the district truly cannot wait any longer if they want to achieve these goals. This begins with not replacing HVAC systems with fossil fuel HVAC systems. This begins with not cutting funding towards solar panels and electric charging stations in the current referendum. This begins with lighting for the school district. And most importantly, this begins with a solid plan that will guide the district into a more sustainable, more economically sound future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was our final speaker. That was.
Okay, thank you so much to our students for coming out and voicing really important points on this topic. Tonight we have 3 agenda items. One will begin with this coming fiscal year budget process. We kick that off. Next, we will have the facility condition assessment, and then we will get a preview of the long-range facilities plan. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Bob to start our process for our upcoming budget development.
Hey, Savion, do you want to do the minutes first?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Okay. I move to approve the minutes from the operations work group meeting dated November 13th, 2023.
Second, Maya.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Okay, and now I will give it to Bob.
Wait a minute. I voted aye.
Michelle's.
Oh, right, okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
And it actually took me a second to do that. It's like, and I just like.
Yeah, just quick cut it like, oh, yeah.
All right, so we're gonna go begin our meeting as we always do, talking about our strategic framework and our goals, but first. Talk about the shorthand, I call it, our focus, our future, kids first. Then in terms of the 3 strategic framework goals, very important and continue to guide our work not only in 23-24, but as we look at the 24-25. Every child is on track to graduate ready for college, career, and community. Goal number 2 is the district, and every school in it is a place where children, staff, families thrive. And 3, African-American children and youth excel in school. Those goals are achieved by staying true to our core values, which is racial equity and social justice, sense of belonging, excellence, giving voice, our focus, and creativity. So today, we're going to cover the revenue forecast for 24-25, which will include kind of a recap of 23-24. Where we are at. We want to go over the education facility condition report that we first previewed the summary table at the November operations. The full report was shared with you in December and is on our website. I want to talk a little bit more of the specifics of that report. And then finally, we want to do the team's going to do a preview of the long facilities plan, outline the work we've been doing for the last few months, several months. And then get a buy-in from the board in terms of this is the proper focus areas for our long facilities plan. Okay, so I'm going to move into the 24-25 budget planning and the approach that we used from year to year. We established our budget goals and guiding principles with both the administrative team and you in terms of the board by restating our strategic goals and our core values. We're going to continue to look at our revenue forecast. I've got a little bit about where I think we're going to be going as we get us going in terms of setting the framework. No surprise, you're going to hear from me. Our ongoing revenues are flat at best, declining likely. We're going to continue to talk about some of those projections and what those will be looking as we develop more specific numbers over the next several weeks. We are in the process of developing workbook, which is baseline staffing for our schools for the 24-25 school year, really based on continuity and stability of ensuring the schools are going to have all things considered 23-24 staffing levels moving forward. And then obviously possible changes based on the 24-25 budget decision board will be making over the next several months. Part of that is, we've been in meetings tonight in closed session on compensation strategy for our employees. We're gonna continue to bring forward to you some of our 24-25 strategic priority areas for action. And then finally, as part of the ongoing review of continuing costs, we have been meeting for months with a diverse work group, including MTI, on our healthcare benefit and projections in terms of costs, which you should have some firmer numbers as February gets underway. All right, here's a timeline of kind of the same thing I just talked about. We're doing what we're doing now in terms of the kickoff and the overview in January. As I said, in February, we'll start getting some ideas of compensation and start bringing back some specific dollar amounts based on your decisions in the month of January. Then we'll take those and we'll make some projections. We'll release 24-25 workbooks on the information that we have available. We'll focus on summer 2024 in February. That leads us to March, having some final numbers on our healthcare costs and also some more decisions as we move towards April on that topic in terms of our strategy. April's a busy month. We pull it all together. I'll bring you a preliminary budget for you to take a look at. Make any comments or suggestions for change. Really get confirmation of these are the numbers that we're looking at. And then begin to take feedback from the public and you in terms of this was a preliminary numbers. We're going to be shooting for a final preliminary budget approval by you at the June board meeting, which will then also have our focus on the ESSER funding and other one-time funds that would be part of our budget performance. Okay, guiding principles, really staying with how the district has approached it in the past in terms of making sure our resources are allocated to be consistent with our strategic goals. Early literacy and beyond continue to be the primary focus on 23-24 and moving to 24-25. We have been, as we will continue to do, keep an eye on our long-range multi-year revenue projections and where our costs are. We'll always, as we do, maximize our operational efficiencies in terms of looking at reallocation of staff, areas of high need, and possibly identifying new staff as we did this past fall with certain schools in terms of unexpected enrollment increases. And then we're going to continue to use data to make better and informed decisions. I just want to review the goals that we've had, which are very consistent with 2024. We will continue to focus on equity use and distribution of resources to meet the needs of the most needy kids at this point in their careers in terms of closing opportunity gaps. We want to continue to utilize educational equity tools. Our predecessors have done a lot of work on developing different tools for the district to use in making equity decisions. We want to continue to take a look at the sections and make sure we're at the board policies for class sizes. And we're going to continue to invest not only on the success of what's going on, but some multi-year investments in terms of curriculum and training for teachers in terms of early literacy reading. And then, as always, because we are a staff-oriented business in terms of 4,000 employees, we need to and continue to offer a competitive salary package, not only to retain but attract staff. It's going to be a little bit more interesting, and when we talk about this, just giving the structural deficit that I'll remind you where we're at as we continue to be moving forward when it comes to compensation. Okay. But first, and I'm going to be spending a little bit more time in this area talking about the budget climate that we have. And there's at least 10 years of underfunding by intentional design by the legislature and the federal government in terms of some of our areas. And it's really important for us as we talk about this is we definitely need to make wise decisions on how we are spending our money. But I also want us to be aware of the false story, the false narrative of the legislature that puts every board, including us, in a position to defend costs when our costs are barely going up by the cost of inflation and our revenues provided by the state are nowhere near the level of inflation. By design, intentional, as the state sits on billions of dollars as surplus, and they choose not to give it towards public education. So I want us just to continue to be aware of that. The position that we are in, we are forced to go to our voters just to maintain a level of revenues to keep pace with inflation, which our revenues have not kept pace with inflation. And then I also want to talk about the underfunding in terms of both state and federal mandates to provide a special education and the statewide $1.5 billion funding gap that exists because the state continues to underfund the categorical aid and the federal government continues to give very little money in terms of IDEA federal funding to cover the costs that are necessary for the individual students' individual education. From our perspective, the state at about 31% of covering our costs for special education requires us to fund this year $66.4 million from Fund 10 revenue to cover the costs of implementing IEPs. That's 2/3 of the cost. That's $66 million that we would have normally for other operations at the district, but we're required to and need to fund the IEPs. Again, it's a strategy of the state pitting one part of our budget against another, and then telling school boards you're not funding costs, right? So we'll continue to identify some other areas as we go forward in terms of the next several months, looking at the budget and talking about our revenues. So a little bit of recap on our revenue streams, local taxpayer and state support. Our revenue limit is where it all begins, and it's controlled by the state, every biennial budget, and based on enrollments. We have been very fortunate that our voters continue to approve increasing our revenue limit, which in Madison really means you can think about for every dollar the voters approve, that's 90% that goes on taxes, and that's 10% of aid we generate back in terms of general school aid. So in Madison, when voters seek to give us permission to spend above our revenue limits, they really are not only the first year 100%, but ongoing. The vast majority of those increased revenues come from the property tax. I'll touch base a little bit more on the state per pupil categorical aid, but we're authorized to spend on that as we go into more of the conversations of looking at specifics of our funding and revenue. Okay, talking about a reduction in revenue limit for 24-25. We will receive less funding from the state based on our next year budget, and really what it is all about declining enrollments. We've had a couple exemptions in prior years called non-recurring exemptions. They started out years ago at about 400,000. They peaked a few years ago, 21-22 at 15.1 million. This past year, it was $7.2 million. Just a little bit about that. So what the state does is if we have a decline in enrollments as we have been having, the state will temporarily give you one-time dollars for the board to make a decision, really to ask voters for additional authority or substantially cut our base programming costs and expenditures. So although the state will make up money with one-time authority and revenue limits, as we go forward, it actually reduces our base revenue, ongoing revenue. So the state gives you a one-time bump for you to make a decision. I've said before, and it's worth repeating many more times to come. The way revenue limits are structured is our revenues are decreased faster than we could possibly reduce our costs, even with our declining population. And so those are important things for us to keep an eye on because they do impact our out-year projections in terms of ongoing revenue. A little bit about confusion and slide, but I want to get in the conversation looking back a couple of years. So this slide graphically tells you what our voters have done in terms of referendum in 2016 and the last 4 years in terms of the 2020 referendum to grow our revenue limit. So the largest section is the base revenue, the revenue we keep from the year before moving into the current year. The green bar on there, for the most part, is the voters' approval, giving us additional operating dollars. So if you look at the first year, which is, here's that, let me look at that, I'll tell you in a second. Oh yeah, 18-19. So the green section of 18-19 is recurring authority given to us. Vast majority by the voters. There's a couple other smaller recurring exemptions, but they're not worth even really mentioning. The point though is the green in 18-19 builds the blue in the following year. So this chart clearly shows we are growing revenue. Our revenue is not growing as fast as our costs of inflation. But by the voters approving the recurring referendum, we're actually building our base moving forward, which is really critical for us, right? Because without that green being added to the blue the following year, you can see, just take that green away from the out years where they show up, reducing the level of the blue. And so the graphical representation here is in 23-24, the voters approved the $10 million. You see that, it built the base for 24-25. But our revenues are only going to be based on to the extent that our enrollments will increase or stay stable with the $325 per member. So our revenues haven't been growing at the rate of inflation. They're likely to level out. So as an example, as a projection for 24-25, the numbers you're looking at there is about a 1.74% increase in our revenues, assuming our enrollments stay the same. Now remember, we'll talk a little bit more detail later. Our current estimates from UW Applied Pop have us declining by about 450 students each year for the next 5 years. So, and I'll get more detailed expenditures when we get more cost numbers in the next couple of months on this. But here, just based on flat enrollments, it's a 1.74% increase, right? CPI is expected to be about 4%. So we're only going to get about half the revenues that we need to keep up with inflation. And that 4% means, I would say at the most optimistic projection, we're already $9 million behind CPI going into 24-25, which is just another way of thinking about our shrinking revenue picture as we look down in terms of the future. Okay. And I'll pause for questions in a few more slides. So, or if you have questions. Oh, I knew it.
Gotta take.
I could see Ally was looking at me a couple of times.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wanna ask this question, in sensitivity to kind of the long-term reality of the district over the last few years. You've talked about declining enrollment several times during this presentation. My understanding is this year we did not see a decline in enrollment, we saw an increase of over 500 students.
Thank you for raising.
Were we to see stable enrollment or another increase, what would happen then? And why are we not factoring in the potential for that? Why do we continue to have the conversation as if declining enrollment is an inevitability? And I ask that question in part because it seems to be out of alignment with some of what national trends look like right now. It also seems to not emphasize our ability to welcome more students to this. Right now, we have a dual language immersion program that could welcome a lot of young people to it, particularly English language learners. Explain to me why we're framing it as declining enrollment will be inevitable.
I don't think declining enrollment is inevitable. I think there's gonna be a time when we have to stabilize. But I can't ignore the fact that UW Applied Pops in the fall gave us a new projection for 5 years for having us declining in terms of the projections. Now, I talked to UW Applied Pops. They don't know why. And I might just clarify. We budgeted a decline of over 500 students, and in reality, we stayed about level. We went from 25,547 in 22 to 25,582. So up about 35 students from 22 to fall of 23. Well, we had been projecting 560 some decline, right? So we leveled out, and the question now is that leveling out? Is that the new trend? Or is that just a blip that we can't explain? So I think when we get a little bit better picture of costs, I do want to do a revenue stream, and I'm reluctant to say there's going to be a significant increase. I can run the projections, but I'm thinking flat. What UW Applied Pops has projected, a 450 drop, and then half of that, right? It's just to kind of be more conservative. Then the other issue is we use 3-year rolling averages. So it takes 3 years of growth to make up for the loss in prior years, 3 years to run it all out of the system. And so as that happens, we will start building our base revenues back. But until that happens, we're gonna be flat at best. Unless we get order approval or more revenues.
Part of the way I'm thinking about this in terms of enrollment particularly is that that's not a passive inevitability, meaning we can do things to attract students to our district and we can do things to expand programming, to increase enrollment. And I do think factoring in those efforts or talking about why we wouldn't engage in those efforts is something we should start doing. I also want to recognize that I think expanding 4K to full day and doing that at additional sites has an impact on our, were you to take away all of the students who are in full day 4K, that'd be a really significant decrease in our enrollment. And so the fact that we have continued to expand that program and will expand that program next year is a factor I think we need to consider. I very much appreciate kind of the conservative approach. I do think we need to be proactive in bringing students to our district and addressing our enrollment. That's it for my questions for now.
Very good. And we'll talk more about that part of the long range plan too. I think is a key input to talk about where do you want us to be focusing our efforts, and full day 4K is an excellent delve into that a little bit deeper. The next graph is a visual display of how when revenue limits were first put in back in the '90s, they were tied to inflation. But the legislature gave up on that really because they went back on a commitment to do that. Because they didn't want to fund it anymore, and then in reverse and 11-12 actually reduced everybody's by 5.5%. That's also when they took away collective bargaining for unions. And any of the increases from that time in terms of revenue really got us back to $0, right? Only years later, which already had the effect of shrinking our base with 0 increases. And then thankfully in 23-24, $325 per member was done for 24 and 25. And then a creative veto by Governor Evers, but 325 years, 400 years, which is awesome. Great. But I will tell you, for us at 325 is about a 2% increase in revenue. Inflation 2 years ago was 8%. This year's probably going to be 4%. So if inflation stays well above 2%, our ongoing revenues are going to be short, as I've already talked about. Okay, so the next couple of slides, I want to focus on the time, really the last 10-12 years in terms of what's been happening in this long spectrum of back and forth. So the next slide you've seen before, I want to reorient you to the numbers in it. The orange line is our total revenue picture and how it changes from year to year on a percentage basis. The blue line is CPI. I'm just focusing on the last year, this current year, 23-24, but revenue limits gave us just a little over 2%, and with inflation being at 8%, the funding gap alone was just under $21 million for us in terms of revenue. If our revenues had increased at 8%, we'd have $21 million more, not only to spend this year, but to build our base for our future years, which is the key part about revenue. It's building that base into the future, not just one-time revenue limit authority or one-time categorical aids of $7, which is the sad thing about school funding. Okay, thanks, Jesse. So this is just restating that revenue limits are critical to for enrollments and students, and really the only way for us to increase revenue is for us to ask the voters to increase, not us, for you to ask the voters to increase their taxes at referendum. Now, next slide talks about the $5.6 billion in state aid that Madison gets. This is a trend I'm confident of saying, the 23-24 level of aids being decreased is gonna be what we are gonna be projected to do until eventually, probably sometime in the next year or two, we will enter what's called hold harmless under the equalization aid formula, but we'll be guaranteed 85% of our year before. And the reason that is gonna happen is because Dane County has great property values, but our equalized values continue to go up. Our enrollment is stable at best. And in the eyes of the formula, equalized value per student. And if you spend more than the average cost of a district, which we do, you get less and less state aid to the point where you'll get no aid. But we will sit around in that hold harmless, kind of right on the bubble. There's gonna be no major change in terms of really think about us as 90% property taxpayer funded and 10% state aids. That is our rate. Okay, so the other thing in terms of taking a look at revenues and the need for us to generate additional revenues, slide you've seen before, we're projected to go into our fund balance $12.4 million come June 30th of 2024 to support ongoing expenditures. Now, I do want to remind you all, you've done some good budgeting over the years. You've built up your fund balance. We have a fund balance of $72.4 million, which is just under the 15% max. And so in terms of us having time and the abilities to have some one-time dollars to hold us, we do have a decent fund balance that can be used to cover in terms of short-time funding or cost overruns. But
I just want to thank you for putting it in chart form with different colors so I can see it. Thank you.
thank you, TJ.
Thank you, teaching. I appreciate it.
I'm just an Excel black and white guy. TJ and Amy and the rest of the comp team, they add colors. It's lovely. They really. I want to talk a little bit about the ESSER funding cliff, not to continue to talk about this and the main point to come away from the 4460 one-time funds. The board has already made a commitment. You moved 111 FTE 110.9 to be exact from local funds onto ESSER. Commitment was to move those funds back to local funding in 24-25. So as we talk about revenue being the same, declining, we have some built-in costs that are going to continue. The structural deficit of 12.4, I'd like to eliminate. We have 12.1 of added costs here. Those are two big areas of costs that we know are coming, and then we want to talk to you about some other initiatives. Okay, but first I want to stick on kind of the summary of the 24-25 projected impacts. We already talked about where it says in writing about the 450 annual decline each year for the next 5 years that we applied POPs. Talk about the referendum going forward. It ends. We had $10 million this year. Another way to kind of look at that $10 million. Without that $10 million in 23-24, revenue limits would have given us $717,174 less in revenues this year compared to last year. So when I say our revenues are flat or declining, without that $10 million this year, we would have had $717,000 less in revenues to operate this year than we had last year, based on the state formula. I want to talk about an unfair formula, but that's just an example of what we do. Okay, so budget planning. We are gonna, the 23-25 budget addressed a little bit about the 325, but I talked to you for us, that's really the 2% raise in revenue when costs have been significantly higher. And it's at least 12 consecutive years of underfunding relative to inflation. And we're not the only district, all districts, their revenue are declining, but 3/4 of the are declining at the moment. And so we're going to continue to determine the budget priorities that we have for 24-25. Then it'll allow us to run some numbers to determine the level of revenue we're going to need in 24-25, and really as a potential ask at referendum come November. All right, so next steps before we go to wide open questions are just to confirm the strategy. So in February, we're going to get a better sense of where we're going to be at negotiations for salary for 24-25. We're going to get final numbers in terms of costs to continue the same health insurance plans. We're going to continue to review staffing strategies and necessary to meet any potential surplus positions. In March, we'll finalize the budget strategy. We'll have the final dollars for healthcare. We'll complete our review of the 24-25 equity projects. And then in April, you'll have an opportunity. We'll release that preliminary draft that will start taking questions from you and the public for you to vote come June on 24-25 preliminary budget. All right, this is where we take a pause and a breath. I get a drink of water and open it up for any discussion.
Every year I have several people ask me the same question, which I know is not correct until I'm going to have us there. The forecast we have is within the fund balance. Every year someone says, are we over the fund balance? And I'm just want to make sure.
You are right in, you're at the high end of your fund balance policy. We're at 14.75%. 15% is the next 10%.
And what do you believe that is a good thing to be that way, or do you think it should be less, more?
I'll answer that question this way. Once you have a policy as a board, you need to meet your policy. So, and I will say across the state, fund balances differ. Some are at 5%, some are at 15%, some are at 35%. Some districts have a fund balance of 80% of their fund expenditures. So it's really unique. But the key is get what works, and then you have a policy and you have to meet that policy. Otherwise, Moody and the other ranking financial groups will not give us a good bond rating.
Got it. That's all my questions.
Board Member Mosman Feltham, followed by Board Member Muldrow.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about the collaborative groups that work on this? Like, when I look at the next step, sort of like who's in the discussions? Where, like, how, yeah, that's, I guess, my question.
Sure. A combination, we'll talk a little bit about the groups that have been involved in the facility condition report and the long facility planning. That's a cross district staffing group. In terms of the budget initiatives, cabinet works with each one of the departments and identifies areas of either we've had some success here, we'd like to continue this, or do it new. They're putting together proposals. Cabinet has met once on some very high level conversations in terms of this is what staff have generated in terms of what they think are meeting the needs working with their school communities. That's really how we generate that list of what I call equity projects for 2050. In terms of the health, that's been not only across Madison staff, administrators, our consultant, M3, and then members of MTI sit in on that, and they hear all the same conversations we have in terms of strategies and costs, and as part of the request to get some cost of continues for the healthcare. Revenue projections, it's really me and my staff taking a look at the formulas. We use the Baird model in terms of helpful hints. The Baird model is just a more in-depth Excel spreadsheet that was created by the finance team 25 years ago. I like the Excel spreadsheet, you know, I helped create it. I know the formula.
You're a big.
But that Baird model is awesome, so it's a great tool. But really the revenue forecasting comes down to us doing multiple options in terms of enrollments. And then the cost side really is the directions from you all in session, what do you want to look at in terms of, you know, max or minimum or somewhere in between or above max that you're required to offer. So does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
Board Member Muldrow.
Thank you, Board Chair Castro. I want to go back to the General Education Fund 10 slide. So you have a prediction in there that will spend about $12 million of fund balance, and I want to better understand that prediction. Does that prediction factor in vacant positions and any revenue we're saving by having multiple vacancies at the educator, administrator, and sub level throughout the district?
It does not. That number says you approve the budget for expenditure for this, which is all positions are fully funded. So as we generate, vacant
20.
positions, slide 20.
There we go.
Yep. As we generate vacant positions, that's what I call unbudgeted revenue streams, right? So, yes, I was actually asking Jennifer Trundle today, where are we at with our vacancy? She hates that question because it's difficult. Yes, so, but you gotta give me ballpark.
Well, you knew who you were gonna hang out with tonight.
But that's my unbudgeted revenue pot, right? So that, those are the factors that mitigate, what we're looking at in terms of, using fund balance for budgeted expenditures, so.
Okay, I think it's important to understand that what we anticipate or plan to spend from fund balance is impacted by the actuals in terms of our spending. And my understanding is the last time we talked about this was we had the potential to generate about $10 million in savings based in vacancies over the course of this year. Is that a correct estimation? I don't want to throw numbers around like that.
Yeah,
Let's turn it into a hypothetical. Let's say maybe it's
yeah,
around 10.
I mean, I think depending on how many positions you have, I think it's several million, 10 million, 7 to 10 million, depending on where we are at. Which I don't think we're gonna have the vacant positions that we had last year in terms of the actual expenditures compared to budget. But I think we're gonna have some, several million for sure.
Okay, I think that it's important for the sake of transparency to understand, hey, if we still have those vacancies and we still end up using $12 million of fund balance, where does that go? And so if we're spending less on labor, but we're seeing our expenses in other areas rise, how are we accounting for that? How are you accounting for kind of the unanticipated expenses in the budget?
That's one of them, right? You always want to be fully staffed, but you also are always looking for areas where there could be some revenues to cover unexpected expenditures, like flaps, things of that nature. So how we account for that is we'll be tracking. I owe a second quarter review of expenditures and revenues to see if we're tracking. I did a quick look at it a week or so ago, and it looks like we're about on track. We're not going to be at the point to say we think we're going to have this many vacancies come the end of the year. That takes a lot of time and effort, and it's probably too early to do that. But that'll definitely be the consideration as we go into the summer and talk about levels of revenue. That'll be, I look at it as a little bit of a breather, a little bit of cushion when we come to the final budget and approving it in October, right? In terms of an expenditure level and staying within that 10 to 15% of fund balance policy.
Okay.
Definitely it's part of the equation for sure.
I think the important part of this conversation is really how it sets us up for next year. And so I think understanding the reality of our current budget and the different factors that inform that reality is pretty important to me as a board member, trying to navigate this next budget. My last question is, you know, we made some really serious investments in this budget in our staff. And we made a really unexpected investment in health insurance. We saw an increase that we didn't anticipate, and we actually thought we would see a really different number. We have been told going into next year's budget that we're going to see a pretty tremendous and significant increase in the cost of insuring people.
Yeah.
Can we talk about one, how this budget has managed to absorb that 13% increase in insurance, and what the cost looks like if that trend continues and increases in terms of insurance, in terms of major investments by the district?
Yeah, we have a request out to get the cost to continue. We won't get that information probably for another month. So we'll come back. I don't know if we'll have for the operation work group, which is 12, I think. That might
Probably won't.
That's probably a little too soon. We're probably looking at more of that number coming in March for us to have the kind of the final number. In terms of this year's budget, we knew that was there. That's one of the increased expenditures that we budgeted for and approved, which is one of the reasons why that's 12.4 fund balance, because it's a higher expenditure. But again, I want to stress that our budget's also projected to have a fund balance at the end. Including, spending 12.4 to be just at the peak of our percent, we're at 4.75. So, that's spending money that I'd have to come to you and say, your policy says at 15, you'd be over. So that becomes a big part of looking at as we approach the final vote, June on our preliminary 24-25 budget, right? That'll tell us how much we have to look for in terms of revenue.
I greatly appreciate that. I think like I'll end by saying I really appreciate your answers to all of the questions I just asked. And I think our next budget is gonna be one of the more challenging budgets I feel like I've ever navigated as a board member. And so I think setting us up for success in terms of that budget has to be, a partnership with us in the community, and it has to be a really clear understanding of what informs the integrity of our student services for students, for our young people, and where we can locate inefficiencies in our budget, in our district. And I think how to get to that conversation in terms of maintaining the integrity of services for young people and identifying inefficiencies in our budget is what I'm really looking forward to in this process. So thank you so much.
All right, Board Member Pearson, did you still have your hand raised or?
Yeah, I did. Sorry, I took it down.
Oh, good. Board Member Pearson, followed by Board Member Vandermolen.
Thank you. Thank you for that segue. I think my question is always like, how can we utilize our community partners to be able to assist in some of the areas in which we may be able to be more efficient? For instance, we have community partners that may be able to provide like mental health supports. And so I don't know if that is also included in some of the budget developments, some of our community partners. And so I guess my question is, are they included in that? And then like, do we include, when thinking about some efficiencies, do we include our community partners part of that conversation? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I've met with student services staff that deal with the mental health part because it's funded in terms of proposals. I know they are looking at way to develop a budgetary item, 24-25. I don't really know the process in terms of who they talk to in terms of the providers. I definitely talk to Cindy and the staff about how they go about collecting that information.
Yeah, because I think that that's, again, as we are developing the budget, will be very important as we're talking about a lot of the positions that are coming off of ESSER, and how that will factor in into our budget, and making sure that we do have the resources that our students need. So it's just a thought that I think is important for us to consider.
Thank you. Board Member Vandermeulen.
I just have one, it's more statement than question, and that's, can we please have a month notice to research and digest the insurance plans before we vote on it? Last time we had 2 weeks, and may I just say that was the most stressful 2 weeks I think I've ever had as a board member. So I would humbly request that.
Are you talking about the
Insurance, if we have to change.
when we had to change?
Yes.
last year Towards the end of the year?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a situation none of us have ever been in, and the board didn't necessarily have an opportunity to know that. The district didn't even have a chance to know that. I remember talking with Ross, and it was a matter of making sure people were insured by July 1. So I feel like Bob's process builds in that integrity, so that the board has an opportunity to talk about those plans.
That's great. That's all I have.
Thank you. I have one process related question, but as Board Member Muldrow alluded to, this is one of the probably one of the most complex budgets we will wrestle with, between the ending of ESSER, the possibility of a new referendum, renegotiating healthcare baked on top of just COLA as well. I'm wondering about the process the budget team and administration is utilizing to get feedback regarding things that we should maybe stop doing and ESSER projects that we want to fund on a permanent basis. I'm wondering what that feedback process looks like.
So I can start, Bob, a little bit around that. So the team has been taking a look at, with Bob's help and the help of the budget department, the commitments that were made on ESSER, both with staffing and with non-staffing priorities. And looking to see, are there efficiencies? First of all, do we believe they still align with our district goals and priorities? And if they do, are there ways to create efficiencies in the current budget and incorporate those in? We're also looking at the FTE, as I said there, to see if those are still aligned with our priorities and our staffing priorities. And again, it's, it's really about what adjustments do we have to make, or what revenue do we have, if those do still align and are part of the foundational work that we're doing within schools. So we will prepare an update. We owe that to the board, a status of all those ESSER projects in position, Board Member Castro. So you can expect that those will come forth and a recommendation from the team around each of those. Those were in the budget book, and we owe you that moving forward in the budget process.
Can we also get one on partnerships?
There's always just a status of partnerships. Yeah, yep.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Any other board member questions? Okay, moving forward, Bob, is that the end of your presentation?
I'm gonna roll us into facility condition report. And we're
Let's
gonna-
do it. Thank you.
A little bit of a group on the facility plan. This is what we're doing the facility condition report in terms of, as I mentioned, the November operations work group, we came out with a memo and the table summarizing the entire report in terms of the facilities that were graded. There was about $969 million worth of projects. But we want to spend a little bit of time kind of refreshing and pointing out some of the information that's already on the web. And again, you all were shared this September, the full report, but it is on the web. So I want to point out, and we're gonna send this out in some weekly updates, so you get a nice big picture of the periodic table. In terms of one of the summary documents that was graded as part of the facility condition report. And that report's gonna show you the composite grade that's in the facility condition report, when the school was built, and student enrollment at each one of those schools. Just a reminder that it was a complex undertaking in terms of, although the facility condition report is a 2020, builds on work completed by 2016, not just by MMSD staff, but our contractors and valued partners in terms of PRA and design engineers, which is in the report. And so it was quite a bit of work to address some of the comments made from the students talking about your renewable energy commitment. Just as a reminder, we radically redesigned the facility condition report to take into consideration the referendum, your resolution on renewable energy by 2040. We broke that report by building into two cost categories. One was to meet the renewable energy resolution goal, and it covered mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire suppression. And the other part was the architectural components to complete the facility specific renovations, which included many of the other categories that is in the facility condition report that, at summary here. So the architectural components included site elements, building envelope, life safety, accessibility, interior finishes, basic landscaping, and then any specialty areas that would be needed at that facility. And so 26 elementary schools, 5 combined elementary middle schools, 5 middle schools, and then combined middle and high schools, and then the Doyle building were graded as part of that facility condition report. And so some of the takeaways of that report were, one, we have facilities that are in need of repair. Not for the lack of ongoing maintenance and ongoing operations, but more of a reality of we have aging facilities. We have a lot of aging facilities. Comprehensive high school work that was done in the last 4 years is an indication of the older facilities and the need to renovate those facilities. The facility condition report did outline for us some schools that need some urgent work in regards HVAC and some life safety issues that really going to have to attend to, I believe, in the next 4 years as a second question to voters at referendum. But I think it's an important consideration. We do have some urgent needs that we need to attend to. Then finally, I want to remind you that the facility condition report really needs to be read horizontally, not vertically. Meaning you have to go school building by school building. You can't just say, well, I just want to focus on the renewable energy part and do half this project. The projects are costed to be done one building at a time. You do renewable energy with architectural components, one site at a time. You can't look at cheap, otherwise the whole cost just isn't reliable. All right, then the themes and takeaways. This is a good one. So this is a great, Jen, I believe this is you're doing excellent work. Good summary table. So what this does is let you know the overall grade. First is important point. None of our schools have an overall grade that is an F or an A, but it breaks out by overall grade in blue by elementary school and the different combined middle and high school. And then in C, overall C grade, you can see the count. So I'll do the overall grade of B. You can see we have 3 schools that have an overall grade of B. This chart that you see is we picked 4 of, I think, are the bigger kind of component parts under each one of the sections, or in terms of power issues, HVAC, life safety, and accessibility. And if any of those individual components were a D or an F, they're listed here in summary format. So for instance, elementary schools, 20 elementary schools had an overall C, but 10 of those schools got graded as a D or an F for their HVAC. Meaning those 10 schools should be looked at in terms of HVAC, in terms of a grade of D or F. Which really means, hey, you better look at this and have a plan pretty quick to get to this kind of work. So this is a great summary table to see at a very high level, what is needed in terms of the report. Any questions on the facility complete report?
Everyone.
Yes.
What constitutes life safety?
Excellent question. Life safety is defined as, going back to the memo, we also have it in the slide. But life safety is fire suppression, door entry, access control, fire alarm detection, and intrusion detection. That's the component life safety.
Question, does disability like stair climbers, what does that fall under life safety?
I believe it's under accessibility. And that's another component under the architectural accessibility. There's a separate.
Okay, because I kind of see it in the fire as both, so I didn't know which one you wanted to be.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other board member questions? Board member Simkin.
Thank you. I'm wondering, for some of those systems that are graded right now as a D, do we have a plan, or let's say HVAC system was to go out tomorrow unexpectedly, do we have a plan to replace it with a sustainable model? In that type of a situation?
There are only a couple of facilities that we have cost of over plan, like geothermal in place of the existing HVAC system. So we'd have to take a look at that specific and cost out the options and alternatives if that happens.
I think the other important thing is if one of our buildings were to go out, we would immediately focus on getting our steam fitters in there and getting it back online. Wouldn't have time to go out and do major renovation. It would be a fix, not a long-term change at that point. That makes sense.
So if it was, I'm trying to think of a different system that could go out also that would require replacement. Do we have any situations like that where it would be helpful to have an immediate or sustainable replacement option? I'm asking that because at the state conference last week, I sat in a system session, and they really talked about having a plan for, for emergencies where you wouldn't have to, necessarily purchase the exact same model. But you would be prepared if something was to happen to move towards a more sustainable model at that moment in time. Do we have anything like that?
I'll step in. So when we are talking about sustainability systems from HVAC perspective, that usually requires retrofitting portion of our facilities. Because it's not only the main central plant, it's all distribution system that needs to be changed. Because I'll give you an example. If we are changing a steam boiler, the distribution system that's associated along with the terminal equipment, meaning the unit vents, like what we see in every classroom pretty much, or VAV boxes up in things, they will not be able to service with geothermal system, which will be sustainable, but the thermal system designs usually with the heat or water through the pipes at a lower temperature. So in order to replace our steam boilers with geothermal systems, we'll need to do a full remodel, meaning all distribution system pipes.
What about an example like if lights go out? Do we have a plan?
We replace them with LED lights that have been forward.
Okay, so we have one example of that. Are there any other examples of if the system was to break down where we could move immediately to a more environmentally friendly option?
I think the light is one of those one-offs because we can replace a classroom or a facility at a time without really having major impact or disrupting education. Where you're talking about moving all the distribution systems in our facilities, then the conversation is more of a major innovation, 9 to 12 months per building. Depending on the size of the building, of course, smaller buildings can be accomplished in less than 12 months, but not in a summer period of time, which makes it even more necessary for us to create a master facilities plan so that we can address all of this and have a scheduled renovation plan to also achieve our renewable energy goals.
Thank you.
Board Member Mosner Feltham.
Thank you, Chair Castro. Just want to make sure I have it right. We're talking about the same report that we saw in November. Nothing is different. It's just context for the next conversation.
Yes.
Okay. That's it. That's my question. Great. Just want to make sure.
Thank you.
I'm like going back in my notes, like just making sure.
Yeah.
I respect the question.
That's good.
That's very clear.
Board Member Vandermeul, and then I'll put myself in the queue.
Yes, my one question is, I know there are certain schools, Black Hook, especially where the bathrooms are not accessible for wheelchair use. How many schools exactly, because I haven't been able to go through the whole report, can we prioritize that as this could be a federal major issue if students can't even use restroom facilities? I am all for environmental change and making things better, but I would like to make sure people have bathrooms.
Thank you, Nikki.
So my question is, I'm wondering if someone from the team can speak to the challenge or what would need to be done to upgrade all school kitchens to be capable of scratch cooking.
We don't have that. I know Josh Perkins and his team have looked at a couple. Svetlin, so.
I would like just to update that we currently have a feasibility RFP. This is to obtain consultants for obtaining the data of what it will take to expand the scratch cooking, so to speak, program to our elementary schools. The RFP is currently posted. We are working with prospective vendors, going back and forth. We did site visits the last few weeks. Once we are able to award a consultants to perform the work, we will come back with the board and discuss this. But we have taken the feedback from the board that we need to find out what this costs. The RFP was posted. We had initial responses. We had a few site visits. There will be more work that we need to do before we can come back and present the information, but this is in the works.
Got it. Thank you so much. Talking to students, better school lunches is always top of mind for feedback, and scratch cooking and utilizing community gardens has always been a major positive for schools to have it. So thank you. Any more board member questions? Okay. All right. Oh, board member Moses. Oh, okay. All right, Bob. I think we're back on track.
All right, we're moving to the preview of the long range facilities plan then. I hand off the mic or not mic to Jen.
Thank you. Happy to be here with you tonight. So the next portion of our meeting, to the outcome slide, this is what we hope to accomplish with this information. And I'll call out a couple of these things. Moving forward is big picture, lots of information, no decisions required tonight, helping you to connect the different parts of the plan, how the facility conditions fits into this. And so your team has been working quite a bit since last summer on the referendum. And tonight you'll get a great detail about that work. I'll call out a couple of pieces here. And so tonight, these outcomes are what we hope that you will have learned by the end of our presentation tonight. But I'll call out a couple of important areas. First, of course, sustainability. And I'm sure that you are as proud as I am of our students that have come and raised that and serviced that issue. And you know that during the last referendum, the Board of Education decision to increase the sustainability due to our community input. And I don't know if you saw that even our elementary schools, most recently I was seeing Shorewood is working on composting and recycling. So it's district-wide that our kids are concerned about sustainability. The other call out is really, it's easy when we talk about a facilities referendum to talk about buildings, but we have to keep in mind that the teaching and learning focus areas are really what drive our facilities. So we'll key on that area over and over again so that the changes we're making in our buildings and the recommendations that we have are really based upon how we use our buildings, how the uses have changed in our buildings. And then also allows the board to address specific immediate needs, which is what happened in the last referendum. Next slide, please. This particular slide really has helps put things in context. When we look at first the board policy, which is the policy of the board to have an updated long-range plan every 3 years. So we started working on the last long-range plan in 2016. We spent 2 years on it. It was finished in 2018, July, and it's really the tool or the information that the board used to make the decision for the 2020 referendum. And so we would hope that as we complete this long-range plan, that the board will have lots of information from which to make a decision. So let's look at a couple of these specific areas. And we want to talk about the use of school buildings, but more importantly, the long-term facility planning to address the current needs of the building. So for instance, when we look at the attendance areas and we look at the applied population lab that gives overall general trends, we need to look further and look neighborhood by neighborhood as to how the population has changed so that you have that information to make decision. And we're talking about the size of the school, the bilingual need in the neighborhood, the diversity of the neighborhood, all of these independent variables that, if you remember previously, we used a firm called Van de Waal, which issued a 157-page report, which gave us lots of detailed information about what we could predict. Unfortunately, COVID happened, so many of the predictions we need to update so that the board has accurate information from which to make decisions. And the other thing that I want to call out in terms of this long-range facility plan is really the board's commitment to getting stakeholder community input, just as we're doing with the superintendent search. And so that will be an important part of this work. The other important thing is, and I'm glad Nikki mentioned accessibility, because we still have schools in MMSD that are not accessible for every student and need to focus on that. And of course, when you look at the conditions report, you can see that the needs outweigh the current funds available. And, you know, some people will say that we haven't maintained our buildings, and nothing could be further from the truth. Since the last referendum, by our regular budgeting process, we've done several projects. Let me give you some examples. Things like an elevator over at Shank Elementary School, another one over at Toki, a couple at Toki, some office renewals for safety that we have done across the district. And so when we look at this plan, which is to be updated every 3 years, we're behind, but we started in August working really diligently on it. We also will bring in what are the changes in infrastructure in the community that will drive some of the work. And what do we mean by that? So for instance, in the long range plan last time, we knew that there might be some bridges added over the Beltline. Well, how does that affect our long range plan? That affects our long range plan because it shortens transportation time to schools if there's a bridge across the Beltline. So those are some examples of the complexity of this long range plan. And I think we'll go on and let Jen take it. The next slide.
Good. So we've been meeting weekly as a cross-functional team since August of 2023. That team draws on both our operations side and also facility side. The group's been led by Lisa and Bob and supported by myself as the project manager, and also with the longitudinal knowledge that Mike's brings to the table. Similar to the early literacy and beyond task force report that we had, we utilized structures, ad hoc groups to help move the work forward. We're doing the same thing here, given the success that we had there. Next slide, please. What we're going to preview for you today is just a little bit of this coming from the drafted report of the long range facility plan. This is only the first draft that we're getting forward. We're going to be coming back to you in February and back to you in March, which with a hopeful end of March regular board meeting to have that final report in your hands. The report itself is similar in organization to some of our other work. So we have incorporated a forward focus on our teaching and learning, which we'll get into more detail in just a minute. We have a little bit of background context and what we've done in the past to situate ourselves. And then we're gonna talk about those current educational facility conditions that we just saw in the condition report that you just viewed, as well as sustainability, and then talk about the drivers that are helping us move forward in thinking about where we go in the future to create those equitable conditions in our schools. And then we'll have the final conclusion of that report. So I'm gonna hand it over to Cindy, I believe, who is gonna be taking us on teaching and learning.
Thank you, Dr. Shepke. I appreciate it. Good evening, everybody. I'm really excited to be able to talk about where we want to continue to grow the teaching and learning within our schools and take advantage of the next iteration of the long-range facility plan. We have 4 key areas that we want to ensure are able to be realized through the long-range facility plan and also build upon the current referendum that we are closing out in our high schools as well as Southside Elementary School. The first area is early learning. We know that it is critically important to continue to invest in our earliest learners. We know we want to continue to prioritize literacy. And with that, we want to focus on early learning hubs. Those early learning hubs would be across the city, north side, south side, where we currently have many childcare desert areas. We also want to ensure that we're able to continue to expand full day 4K so that, again, our earliest learners are invested in and we are able to provide those opportunities for families as they're considering coming to Madison as their new home. The second area, which we've talked a little bit about, and we will talk again in February, is multilingual education. In order to make sure that we are fully realizing all of our multilingual education programs, we definitely need a feasibility study. Mike mentioned the report from Vandewaal in the past. That will be really important to see where our students are, specifically our students that are identified as English learners. With that, we know that we will do some expansions of dual language and other language immersion programs, as well as continue to invest in recruitment opportunities, retention, and professional development for our staff that are bilingual. Well-rounded opportunities. Again, this is expanding upon the work that has happened at our high schools where we have built out amazing 21st century labs that are really providing the opportunities for students to earn college credit and or industry certification. Those opportunities need to be expanded down to our middle schools. We're thinking about what that will look like for our arts programming, not just the courses and the program offerings, but the spaces to actually be able to run these opportunities. Expanding career and technical education programming, especially at the middle school level, so students have an opportunity to do more exploratory learning, hands-on learning, where we can really tend to the adolescent learner needs, project-based learning, and needs that adolescents tend to have where they need deeper learning opportunities. In addition to that, when we think about our spaces, we want to really focus on improvement of co-curriculars as well as the opportunities MSCR offers for our community to access our spaces. So when we think about co-curriculars, what might that mean again for our arts programming in the after-school world? What might that mean for thinking about athletic programming? And what might that be for MSCR to be able to come in and access our spaces for their own programming? And last but not least, this is also critically important to continue to improve our culture and climate. The physical spaces actually impact the culture and climate in our schools. So we want to ensure that as we're thinking about this long-range facility plan, the spaces that are accessible for students, private spaces, we are really thinking about the mental health needs and social emotional needs where private spaces are needed for our students. The lighting and the ventilation, thinking about inclusive spaces. I know that came up earlier when we were looking at the facilities report. Those outdoor spaces and other social spaces for our students to really cultivate that community. And then also thinking about the need for flexible learning spaces. Similar to what we have in our high schools right now, we want spaces where learning can happen in any space throughout the school and doesn't have to happen just within a classroom or the walls of a classroom. We're excited to continue to share more of this as we build out the long-range facility plan and we come back to you again. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Mike. Dr. Herding, back to you.
Thank you. So one of the things that's become ever clearer, and we've talked a lot about it tonight, is this board's priority in sustainability. And you know, the city of Madison's goal, MG&E's goal, and our district. And we've talked about that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. We're really looking at the big picture view, and we'll have more information to follow. I want to focus on the other 2 points. And I don't know if you read the Wisconsin State Journal article on Sunday, which had a featured memorial. And I can't tell you, having watched these projects come from the planning stage into completion is very, very exciting. And I love talking about MMSD, but we can be really proud of the work that our teams have done and the decisions the board's made with respect to the 2020 referendum. When we were out getting community input, the last referendum, the decision was made by the board to focus on the high schools. We made it, and it was foreshadowed by our community and by the board, that we don't have the funds to continue to redo all of our buildings. So we will be coming back and asking again for a referendum next time. We will likely focus on middle schools. And so with one exception, we have taken care of our high schools, which most of our MMSD kids access, except for Shabazz. And at the time, we talked about Shabazz being included in the next referendum with Sherman Middle School as one of the middle schools that would be updated. So I wanted to call that out. And then the other thing that was important in the last bullet, we talked about the condition report and helps prioritize the facilities most in need. So that's where the board added some things like Capitol High School last time, so that they would have a place, and the Southside Elementary School. So we focused on high schools, and then we added a couple of these other areas in after stakeholder input and decision-making by the board. The sad state of school finances, Bob has detailed greatly, means that we cannot do this out of just general operating funds. And as I mentioned before, we've done several projects. ESSER funds did quite a bit as well. So those all become part of the big picture puzzle as we look at the next report, long range facilities report. And so next slide. So if you think of the question, how do you as a board make the decision of what to do? We're going to suggest that these are the drivers and these are the tools that you use to help make that decision. We've talked about the educational facility condition, which might help identify some immediate needs. You know, we think of our buildings and I guess tired is the best description I've heard over time of our old buildings that haven't been updated. And as our students continue to go to other districts to compete and they come back, now we have facilities at the high school level that our students will have pride in. And as Cindy mentioned, climate and culture does make a difference with the building. The second item is the equity-based educational priorities. What have you as a board decided is important in terms of equity? And that could be in terms of, we've done the high schools, and that's a district-wide. Now we're going to focus on the middle schools. And then stakeholder input. When we went around and we did many, many nights and board members were with us about the 2020 referendum, helping to decide what is important to our community in developing the plan. And then we'll look at other relevant data, such as the enrollment projections. And I talked that last time we used a report by Vanderwall, and we will be looking again at figuring out how to get that detailed information really down to the neighborhood so that it will help us drive decisions. And let me give you a couple examples. We own property out at near Olson Elementary School. We met with Veridian recently and they're talking about the development of that. So it was predicted in the last plan that eventually Olson and Chavez will be overcrowded and will need to build a school. Is that still the case? What does the enrollment sit? What are those projections? We also own property out in Sprecher Road. And that's another question, like, what is happening in that area? The other interesting thing is that there were some spots in the city which had a preponderance of people my age that don't have kids in the schools anymore, starting to recycle that, the homes. There was kind of 3 hot spots in the district, kind of on the near west side as to those homes would turn over. Are those still factors that we need to look at? And it's fascinating to look at the detail that can give us in terms of building turnover, developments in the community. You know that, I think you know that Bob and I are back working with the City Plan Commission and keeping an eye on developments in the city of Madison. And it's a clear focus of the mayors of all this area to have affordable housing. Because right now, what you typically see in Madison is large apartment complexes for Epic employees. And so we're always wondering what's the affordable housing? Where are those multifamily units being located? And then the sustainability we've talked about. I don't need to go further into that. And then the progression of district improvements, again, that we foreshadowed we would do last time. I see your hand, Nikki. Let me just get through.
Perfect. I apologize. I was just trying to get in the queue. I apologize. Mike, you're doing a great job, so I apologize for interruption.
It's all right. I'm just acknowledging you. Let's go on to the last slide, and this is had a whole lot of information on it. So we do want to build on the momentum of the 2020 referendum and actually the 2015 referendum. And I'll never forget when the first time I went into the Madison East new auditorium and didn't see those orange bowling alley type chairs and saw what a difference that facility made for our East High School kids. And so keeping that end goal of mind of creating spaces that are beautiful for our students. And of course, the trend and what do we see in education right now? And I just finished a gig in Sun Prairie of working with their new high school. It's these flexible spaces. So how do we build those flexible spaces into our middle schools as we have our high school? So the considerations, and we talk about, this is an opportunity really for Madison taxpayers to support the schools and continued updating of our tired facilities. And it is so fun to go into these facilities that we've updated and see how our students are taking good care of these facilities and the pride that they're having in the school. In terms of considerations, you know, the challenge is staying true to the commitment of student achievement. And I talked before about making sure that we're remembering to bring in the educational side and how we use our buildings, whether it be for MSC, our community use, well-rounded music spaces, whatever the case may be, that we're providing these opportunities for all students. And just understanding the tension between the cost to achieve everything under sustainability costly, and you have to look at the payback as well. So nearing the end of a lot of talk, what are some of the challenges? And of course, we've talked about the timeline to do the renewable energy goal. Another challenge is the shortened time that we're developing this plan. We took almost 2 full years last time, and we're condensing that. The good thing is we did a lot of the foundation work last time so that we don't have quite the huge task that we did last time. And then just remembering another challenge is the current staff capacity. I'm both with vendors and with our staff. We can work on about 4 to 6 buildings at a time. And the incredible amount of planning and work with stakeholders does take tremendous amount of work. However, you can see the outcomes in our recently completed facilities. Let me just check my notes here. I think that that's kind of a really snapshot of the long-range facility. I want to talk a little bit about what we've done so far. And so you know that we've been meeting weekly on our long-range facilities plan, and that work is all encompassing. We've had regular meetings with the foundation, and the foundation is ready to serve as a partner, and I think Bob will go into a little bit more detail. You know that you have the facility condition report that you received a couple months ago. We expect to get you this long-range facility plan in March. Then we have work to do on enrollment projections, and I talked about really updating the detailed information by neighborhood that we had last time to help you make decisions. Other additional data such as culture and climate is also important. And then continuing to provide all of the information that we share with you on our website to keep our stakeholders informed. So I've talked not too many minutes and covered an awful lot of information. It's really exciting to be talking with you about this and moving forward with this work. I'm going to turn it over to Bob to talk about next steps.
Questions before we vote on steps?
Sure.
Nikki,
you're on you.
Yeah, two things. One, the one regret that I didn't think about when we did the first referendum was when we increased the size of the building, the lift it was on our janitors. I did not realize that, and so I think we need to take that into account. I'm not saying not to improve. At the same point, I didn't consider making facilities as big as they were, the effect it would have. My other one is please put accessibility as one of the things that we need to focus on, because I understand that it goes under culture and climate, it goes in other areas, but using the bathroom is a human right. So that's my only statement, but the big one is on the janitors, because I have got winded trying to walk through the new memorial, let alone the new LaFollette.
Thank you, Nikki, for raising that concern with our custodians, and it's a point well taken. And thank you also for lifting the accessibility. You know, for the Madison Metropolitan School District, we need to have all of our facilities accessible for all of our kids. Couldn't agree with you more, and committed to determining what those accessibility challenges are.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Other questions? Board Member Muldrow?
Thank you. So I want to ask, in terms of the long range facilities plan, you talked about an emphasis on our 12 middle schools. The last time we looked at the report, what seemed to be emphasized was actually our elementary schools. Am I misunderstanding the report we most recently received?
I can't speak to the report you most received. I can talk to you that our commitment in the last referendum was really looking at middle school. There are some elementary schools that have some pretty significant needs. One of the challenges with our elementary schools is how does our enrollment affect the changes we make at elementary schools? And so we don't have enough detailed information at this point to understand, should we invest in investing in all of the elementary schools that we have? or will enrollment trends lead us to make other decisions? And so we know that the middle schools will continue to be needed for the next decade, no matter what. With our enrollment and the different highlighted areas and growth areas, elementary schools, and looking at the current capacities and the long-range plan, we really need to look deeper into that. And I think that what you are referencing was some of the concerns with HVAC in terms of updating some of those systems, looking primarily at that one category. So I hope that clarifies that.
I think it does. I think, you know, the emphasis on our 12 middle schools and kind of the range of what those 12 middle schools need. You know, if you think about kind of the difference between a school like Badger, that is a much newer facility in comparison, you know, a school like Sherman, that is an older facility and has seen significant investments. I really appreciate that you emphasize the investment in the theater at East High School. I think it's important to remind our community that we didn't go to referendum to make that improvement. That improvement was made by fundraising for that school. And so I think the capacity and potential of our community to show up and support investments in our school is something we need to be significantly grateful in this district. We live in a district where people really show up for our young people. That being said, when you bring it back to kind of the middle schools and the different state of our middle schools, am I getting ahead of myself if I ask you, what is the necessary investment in those 12 schools? And how do you look at the schools who need very different things? One of the things that was controversial about our last referendum is that we gave the same dollar amount to all of the high schools. Now, in my opinion, that is not the same investment in each school. Those schools are very different sizes and have very different numbers of students. So per pupil, we gave the most to La Follette, we gave the least to West High School, if you think of it in that way. However, in terms of dollar amount, everybody got the exact same amount. That doesn't seem like it's a feasible approach to our elementary or our middle school level. So what is our approach to investing in those schools and explaining that investment to our community?
I think that's an excellent question, and I think that precisely situation that you mentioned with deciding whether the same amount for all the high schools did come up late into it, and I don't know that we ever really got a good handle on that, and that's something I think we need to do with the next referendum. The other variable that comes up with middle schools is, like, for instance, in the 2015 referendum, we did extensive remodeling at Jefferson. And so that certainly doesn't have the needs that the other middle schools have. That's probably one of the higher ones. We also did some investing, as I mentioned, with Pokey has had some remodeling, and Shank. So it's a little bit more complex this time in terms of understanding it, but certainly I would raise Sherman Shabazz and Black Hawk Gompers as a focus area. I mean, we have a portable classrooms yet at Samuel Gompers Elementary School. It would be nice to not have portable classrooms there.
I think that there's a few factors that are important to take into consideration for me as a board member at this level. In part, it is how we're talking about the size and population of our students in a given school, and the kinds of needs that any given facility has. And I do think the argument for why we're going to invest has to be driven by equity. I want to say that I really appreciate Board Member Vandermeulen's emphasis on inclusion. What does it mean to make sure we're embracing universal design? I think we as board members need to consider a policy that requires universal design, a policy that requires inclusive playground equipment. I think we need to codify that belief and that enthusiasm for inclusion into our expectations in terms of policy. When we talk about inclusion, I think having an expansive understanding of what we mean is really important. And so what I want to celebrate in terms of our most recent referendums is the incredible efforts that have been made in terms of universal design, and in terms of accessibility. And Nikki, I really appreciate, Board Member Vandermillen, I really appreciate that you emphasize restrooms, because I think for our trans and non-binary students, having access to a restroom that aligns with your gender identity has been a really important issue. And I think we made incredible strides towards being a far more inclusive and intentional district. And I hope we do that and take that into consideration as we move forward. The last thing I want to say is related to sustainability, and it is a question that I'd like to direct at you, Superintendent Livestead. I think that this board has, for the most part, consistently demonstrated a profound appetite for sustainability. I think it's an area of alignment between this board, this administration, and the community. I think what happens for the administration that's very different for the rest of us is being able to execute it. And that's about capacity, right? Do we have the capacity to do this thing we really care about, that is very important, that is incredibly urgent? As one of the things I hear from our students over and over again, if you all don't stand up for this environment, there is no future, there is no jobs, there's no careers, there's no college if we don't have clean air and water. So what can we do to build the capacity of our administration and to staff sustainability as a district?
So thank you for that. I'm actually back on, Jesse, I'm actually back on slide 40, because much of what you talked about is anchored in this slide. We spent a lot of time thinking about this. First of all, you're dead on, Ali, around the equity-based educational priorities as being an anchor in the work, right? These are the anchors around which we, as a team, have an obligation to bring the board some recommendations and then get some input from all of you on what do we want to do? What middle schools, when, where? We know we can't do them all. Bob, you and I were talking today about, maybe 6 schools a year. But we need more feedback around that. So just know that these are sort of the anchors out there, and we know that we need more feedback. I would say that around our sustainability goals, which are aggressive, we are going to need a focused work group, team, and somebody to lead that work. If there's anything I've learned in all my years in FSD, is that if you don't have somebody who's leading it, nobody's really leading it, and nobody's really project managing it. And Jen has taught me a ton around that. But I agree when it comes to that sustainability piece and the goals the board has set. We need to know someone's leading that, and someone's leading it with a team of people that are adding voice to what that looks like. I also just want to say, because Mike, you identified some challenging steps, and I just want to honor the board here today. I want to honor the group that has is beginning this work. We have a high-level summary of this today. But our process this time, going towards a 2024 referendum, is going to feel different than it did in 2020. The runway, it looks a little different. And we actually know that we need to get input, maybe at a different time. Maybe it's placed a little bit differently, but what are the big rocks we want to go in to the referendum talking about? Our investments around those educational priorities. Board Member Muldrow, you were talking about what are the enrollment strategies we want to invest in, right? That's exactly the place to think about that here, right? Here's where we embed that language, and getting that stakeholder input around who's up and ready for scratch cook kitchens. Having some neighborhoods and some of our schools provide some feedback about, our school is actually, slated for some improvements. We'd like to do the improvements around scratch cook. So I think where that input happens may feel different this time, but as long as we as a team identify sort of what the drivers are in those areas, I think that's all part of how this process will be individualized for our 2024 referendum. And I do believe that we need to put some accountability behind those sustainability goals, and we're going to need a team to do that. And that'll be something that will come through. I think the long range facility plan, you see some recommendations, we'll want some feedback on that. And you may even see that coming up through an equity goal in the budget, maybe, Bob, as we start talking about that too. So I hope that gets at a little bit of what you were wondering.
No, that absolutely brings home exactly kind of what I'm hoping for. And what I hear you saying is that we need to invest and we need to have a person heading that work.
Oh, we do.
And we have not established that. And so the steps to establishing are something I'm excited to do in partnership with our current administration. And is something that I think we need to take into consideration in terms of our budgetary reality, what that means we're investing in. The thing about this conversation is I think that we often talk about sustainability in terms of the costs related to it. And there is a difference between an expense and an investment. This is a long-term investment in the future of our world. If we want to do right by our kids, we have to do right by the environment. And so I think we also need to be mindful of how we talk about the savings generated by our investment in sustainability. For my fellow board members, my last comments are that I really hope that we come up with an initial policy suite that reinforces what we want to see happen long-term in terms of policy. So I think that what we should be doing is talking about banning single-use plastic. We should not be purchasing any part of our fleet that isn't electric. We should be championing efforts that have been effective in other districts, things like Meatless Mondays, and policies that require composting and recycle and trash cans that are labeled landfill. We have a tremendous opportunity to lead in this community around sustainability. And I think that is both incredibly exciting and intimidating, because I think it means that we have a lot of work to do. And I think that we have a lot of people in this community who want to do this work with us. The other thing I think we forget to talk about in these conversations is how many people we will employ to do this kind of work.
Yeah.
We are the 6th largest employer in this community. We employ thousands of people. We pour the money from a referendum right back into the people who live here through jobs. And these are well-paying union jobs when you talk about the construction of our buildings for the most part. And I think that our commitment to, investing locally and investing in labor with integrity in order to realize these projects is something we need to emphasize in these conversations as we have them long-term. That's it for my comments.
Okay, I see 3 other board members. I don't
have any.
Yeah, board member Mosner Feltham, followed by board member Pearson, followed by board member Simpkin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much. I have one question. I've got some questions. The first one is super easy. It's I got 11 person cross-functional weekly planning meeting. I see 1, 2, 3, 4 people are named here. I heard Dr. Moss, 5. Can you tell me who the other 6 folks are on that?
So it's Mike, myself, we have 2 members from communications, Jody and Amy, we have Lisa. Along the back wall, we have Cedric and Svetlin. And then we have Bob, TJ, and Carletra as well, and Cindy Green. And Beth Bobby.
Thank you. I don't know. I was super curious about this day. I asked the same thing before. Okay. When we think about what are we going to do with regard to our tired facilities, one thing that I hope that we're considering from when we think, what did we call it here? Educational priorities. That is not just like educational priorities for after it's done, but like what happens inside of a school when you're going through a massive renovation. I'm still interested in whether or not we can, rather than having all of like every single situation. I know like 4 high schools at one time, it wasn't really possible, but I wonder if as we think about what do we do and when, if we can make considerations for, are there like neighborhoods where we can group them and then we can say, okay, all of you middle schoolers are going to go to this we're gonna build a brand new school, we know we're gonna build it, we can move you 300 middle schoolers or 400, 500 into this school, do the old school, and then move you back, rather than having your teachers like moving science equipment 8 times a year. Because that impacts the educational priorities of that year. And so I hope that that's part of our consideration. Likewise, when we think about that, like when there is a school that is like in the middle of a huge construction project, the adults at that school then have to like manage that project, which means they can't do the rest of their jobs effectively. And so I wonder if there's consideration about staffing, and if we are saying like this is something we want to build a staff around, perhaps that could overlap. Yep, that's what I'm thinking about. That's what I'm thinking about. And I'm looking forward to the full report. Like, I'm really, really excited to read it. So thanks.
All right, Board Member Pearson, then Board Member Simpkin.
Yeah, my questions were in alignment with Ali, especially around the middle schools and what we are seeing as a priority to update them. Especially around, I know Cindy mentioned the arts, but also the opportunity for languages. I think that that's a space that sometimes we forget, but are super important as we are looking for our middle school to go into high school. And then the opportunities for them to have that continued. And I would also be interested to see like what that looks like in Spanish, but also other languages like Mandarin and such that as we see it other districts are doing, but also just movement from our middle school to our high school and to our colleges of WA, Madison and other colleges. So I would be interested to see how we kind of create those spaces for that. I also have questions about the equity-based educational priorities, and I understand that we are also giving what we believe they should be. I think for me, I would just implore for all of us board members to really think about deeply how all of these things meet together. And so our facilities, our education practices, our policies, our like what needs to get updated, our referendum, and then really like what is our plan as a board and what do we see as being extremely important in the next like 5 years and so forth. Because I do think that that does become extremely important as we are making the decisions moving forward around our budget and around those educational priorities. That will affect students in 5 to 10 years. It may not be an immediate effect, but we are making decisions not just for only the next couple of years, but really for the next 10 years. So well, my kids are be out of high school then, but it's really the next generation of students and what that looks like. I don't have any other questions. It was just really some of the comments in alignment. And I'm excited also to see like what the next steps are and where we're gonna actually be planning some of this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Simpkin.
Okay, so I am finding myself impatient to talk about the next steps. So that's where my brain needs to go right now. When I'm thinking about specifically around the sustainability aspect of all of this plan, it's really hard for me to not have a recommendation at this point from the administration saying this is what we recommend and this will get us to this percentage of sustainability. And so I'm wondering, is that what we can expect to be receiving is a specific recommendation that we can then work with? And will it include those numbers?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me about when we're gonna see that. Please.
Well, Jen, I know we talked about that today, and we believe that we will have the draft long-range facilities plan to the board by the March quarter.
Okay. And so it will also zero in though on that sustainability component. Okay, that's great. What's our baseline right now? Do we know what percentage of our energy is from renewable energies? Where are we starting at?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't,
We are in
we have a way.
below currently, and this is not an official number, but it's 15 or below. Geothermal systems partially in West High School, also in elementary geothermal system in Badger Rock, and our LED retrofits are not district-wide yet, but we're bringing it up as an option for the boards to make a decision in the regular meeting there.
Okay. Are we gonna receive that proposal again around the LED lights with that?
Yes, later this month, yes, in the regular meetings.
At which meeting?
In the regular Board of Education. meeting
Okay.
Next Monday.
Great. And then what's the implementation timeframe for the dashboard that you approved?
We are currently working on it, actually. We are about 2 months out before we can deploy that. So if everything goes on track, so far it has been on track, but there's a lot of work that's taking quite some toll on our team because we are working with McKinstry, our energy consultant, who's supporting the ATS platform right now. And we are working on bringing all of our pool sites online and available data for that.
So they're all gonna go on like the same day, you turn it on, everything?
Yes, first we will do some beta testing, so to speak, make sure it works as intended, and then we will roll it out to the schools.
Okay, my last question. Is something needed from the board in order to move forward with creating a sustainable manager position? Or is that something that will come to us from the administration as a?
I think that will come to us or come to the board through the budget proposal and the long range facilities plan as part of the infrastructure needed to implement the long range. Yeah, great question.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Board Member Richmond.
Thank you. I'd like to quickly speak from the perspective of a student and in consideration of the 800 plus students that express their support of prioritizing sustainability through the letter that was mentioned earlier tonight, and quickly mention an equity consideration related to sustainability. As MMSD maintains their commitment to equity and ensuring that all students are college and career ready as they move into the future, I think it's really crucial we consider what role sustainability measures play in realizing that vision. Climate issues disproportionately affect low-income and marginalized communities, and that's something I've observed through my engagement with diverse groups across the district. I in particular think of transportation issues in the last few months and how low-income students are disproportionately affected by delays because of extreme weather. So I think that's something we really need to consider as we move forward. And then one other point that is in consensus with a lot of other groups that I've talked to over the past few months is that in recognition of the upfront costs and short timeline, students believe that it would be significantly better for the school district to focus on meeting their current goals, even if those goals can't feasibly be implemented in by 2040, even if it's 2041 or 2042, striving for those goals is significantly better than contributing to carbon emissions for another chunk of years that are directly impacting current students like me and my peers and students in the future. And with that, I'd like to ask one question in consideration of all students. What role can students play in accelerating and supporting these efforts as we move forward?
So I know we have 3 other slides that are left that I think are important for Bob for you to talk about, because that gets to a little bit this notion of advisories and also input that's going to be coming. I feel like that's bubbling up for some of you and you're wondering where that voice comes in and what sort of are the structures and the spaces and places where continued input can be gathered. So I want to be sure first to acknowledge that I believe there's a current advisory around sustainability right now that has some students on it and some former people in that group. I can see continuing to advise the work of the long-range facilities plan and specifics. Bob, I'd like if you would, take a shot at slide number 43. And talk a little bit about other spaces and places where advisories, can be in place as we move forward. And again, just to sort of pull back to that 10,000-foot view here, right? The role, of the administration making some recommendations in the long-range facilities plan. And then the role that the board takes in terms of what are the big rocks, right? What are the big projects that we want to take on? Sort of what's that amount of money you want to put forth in a referendum, both on the facility side. And also, remember Bob talked about needing a referendum on the operations, right? So the will and the guidance of the board around those high level decisions are really important to stay at that high level. Then we know that through further input, we're gonna get some more feedback around some details about what happens within each of those recommendations. I too really wrestle with, gosh, you know, I was thinking about all kinds of ways that I could have interjected here to what was a fabulous presentation that would have taken me right into the weeds and thinking about things that take us away from our purpose here, right, as a team and a sport. So just remember that we're thinking about some big rocks in this right now. Our goal is to get this to you in March so that you can make the decisions you need about referendum questions by May, is what I'm thinking. So that then we can get feedback about specifics after that. So we're gonna keep bringing that back. So I just wanted to sort of pull up that high level, because we all get a little like thinking, right, we wanna talk about this. Laura, I am with you. I'm with you on the next steps, but wanna stay in partnership around sort of those big pieces to put in place before you start managing all this. So Bob, do you wanna share a little bit about what we have on next steps, and then also share about the role of the foundation, because they're gonna play a huge role in terms of advising and public input.
Right. Thanks. And so we'll go through our next steps in terms of, I just want to reiterate that what Jen mentioned. The staff have been working since August of 23. We have conversations with different members in the community, including folks on the Madison Public Schools Foundation. But now that we've got the preliminary draft, preliminary ideas out in terms of, so we plan our focus areas, I'm hearing what I perceive to be pretty much consensus that we're on the right track. But we start getting the more official community engagement input beginning in February. Lisa's been meeting, been talking with Board President Nichols about creation of a referendum advisory committee. We're expecting to get that rolling in spring of 2024. That's going to include a diverse cross section of the community in terms of its membership. We're going to continue to work and finalize the updates of all the work that we've done on the referendum 2020 progress and finishing up. We're going to continue to talk about the long-range facility plan as it gets a little bit more detail over the February work group, and then our plan again. We're going to be shooting for a final long-range facility plan at the March Board of Education meeting. So we'll have February to continue to work on it in terms of the operation work group and some more details. We're going to continue to be talking about the budget, which talks about the operation side in terms of where we are at with the facility planning meeting. We continue to meet weekly on it in terms of the detailed work group. We've been meeting regularly with the Madison Public Schools Foundation. We've got a slide coming up to talk more about that. And as we go over the next 2 months, we'll continue to take a look at the data as we get it. We'll have the second Friday in January counts due end of this week, Friday, Department of Public Instruction. So I know our team will finalize it. We'll continue to kind of take a look at the instructional planning priorities that we laid out. So That's our next step. It seems like a lot been going on that we've all been working on in terms of staff, but now we're starting to get to you, the board, to take a look at and see what we've been doing. A lot of work has been going on. So we go to the Madison Public Schools Foundation. Madison Public Schools Foundation, they have agreed to run and approve the referendum campaign. Obviously, they are able to do the advocacy work. We are not, as a district, and or we give information, finance district costs and revenues. But their 501(c)(3) board did approve that. They took a vote. They have delegated the campaign to a 501(c)(4), which didn't even know it existed until the school foundation told me about it. Their official name is Schools Make Madison Advocates. They have contracted with campaign consulting with Spectre Row Strategies. That's the firm that did work for us and the foundation back in 2020. Very knowledgeable group of professionals. We've been meeting regularly with the planning group that includes Spectre Row and members of the Madison Public School Foundation staff and foundation board. We're going to continue our conversations, obviously, with staff internal. Lisa has met often with the chamber talk. We've met many times with the city of Madison on a variety of issues, transportation and just their issue, the TID conversations. MTI has been at the table, continue to talk to MTI in terms of their thoughts on operating revenues and then of course building Great South Central Wisconsin, and Madison Gas and Electric, obviously a force in Dane County and Madison, been involved in the last referendum and continue to be involved as we look forward to 2024. There's a big economic impact study coming out, expected to be released at the Public Schools Foundation is working on spring of 2024. Pretty sure of what's going to say. Strong schools, strong economy, but they'll have numbers and they'll have facts, and so that'll be great to have. Then they're working on putting together a campaign team, and they're recruiting co-chairs in the steering committee that will help inform us and the board. And then we'll begin polling like we did in 2020 in terms of you get a little bit better sense of the operations and specific facility questions and capital debt questions. It's good to get some polling questions out and see what the public would respond to. And of course, the Madison Public Schools Foundation does a phenomenal job on fundraising, and they'll continue to do that for us. So it's been a good partnership. Expect more work to be coming in the next several months. So that's kind of where we're at. Any questions about that Jen can answer? No, any questions about that? She's the project manager. I just do what she tells me.
She's on me.
Thanks. I was gonna add myself to the
And then we have the last
queue
slide.
real quick.
Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I'll just wait for it to be done.
So the long range facility plan in term our focus on teaching and learning. I think sounds like we, based on the comments, at least no disagreement in terms of the correct direction. One, and then a little bit about the sustainability in terms of consideration for 2040. And I just wanna say again, which we've shared with you, but it's real important for you to understand what that facility condition report talks about. That $968 million price tag includes the cost to meet the renewable energy 2040 goals, right? And that's never been done before in terms of prior facility on the Brooks Center facility, not that renewable energy. The conversation about climate of 2040 is just based on what we were able to make as a district and what the private sector was able to produce in terms of working on school facilities. We did 4 comprehensive high schools, a brand new elementary, and really renovating Hoyt and Capitol High. So 6 facilities in 4 years. And if you take 6 facilities over 4 years, map out what that means. If we can handle 6 facilities based on current history, how many years it'll take us to get to 42 sites? We're in 2050, 2060. If we do no more than 6, right? Now, I think you can build in staff up in terms of contracting for architectural design, start mapping out specific buildings to have them geared up and ready to put shovel in the ground versus waiting to get a referendum passed to spend your first year of planning, so you really don't get to a shovel in the ground until really 1.5 years before your cycle. I think there's things to mention, but I want to be clear in terms of none of the staff wants to back away from it. And it's just the timing and the logistics and dollar amounts to get there in that time, and just to recognize that. So that became real clear as we were mapping out the long range facility plan and then the facility condition. So that ends the official, and now questions.
Okay, any board member questions? Board member Mosner Feltham.
Thank you. Not a question, but to respond to the first question, I think, yes, in lots of ways, but, but I wonder, I always wonder, I think a lot about, and people here know, I think a lot about like, how can our schedules be flexible to make progress and really exciting learning opportunities for students. I don't know that the facilities have any impact on that. Like, I don't know, maybe not, but if so, that's something that is near and dear to my heart.
Thank you. I just had one comment, one question, with regard to the sustainability goal. Look, I view this as an effort, a commitment that will take multiple boards. And personally, as a board member, I just want to pass the baton to future boards to keep that goal viable. It'll take multiple efforts, investments, all of it. I think we will get some assistance from the federal government that incentivize these kinds of goals as well in the future. And then one question with the long range facilities report, will it include an analysis of the costs to repair or retrofit a building versus the cost of just building a new building?
I can answer that question, Board Member Castro. I believe that the long range facilities plan will not include that data, but we do have the data, the preliminary budgetary costs that we are working with my team and consultants like PRA and a few other ones, you know, Transformers, presentation and construction companies, the current referendum vendors, Findorf, Huffman Kiel, EOA, and so forth. We do have a comparative analysis between renovating versus new costs, and we can share that, but this will not be reflected in the actual plan. I believe that in order for us to be successful to reach our end goals of renewable energy, no matter what the timeline is, we will need to have a master plan that will outline the specific needs for we want to renovate facilities in these areas. And we want to build new facilities for the growing communities in the areas that the city is developing. I think a master plan on a 20 to a 30-year map will be suitable for that exercise and to incorporate specific needs for, because a lot of our retrofit renovations will include capital high school type renovation, almost to in order to achieve all of these components to be replaced in order to achieve the sustainability goals. So we will need to have a good plan of what we are planning to do with the school while we are constructing this in 9 to 12 months. And we can't hit those long-term goals without having a master plan year by year and going back to the board every couple, 3 years to update which are the next which are the next phases of renovation so that we can hit the end goal. Right, but I think the major task in front of us here would be to master plan based on the directive we get from the Board of Education, what are the priorities and how we need to develop.
Got it. Thank you. Board Member Muldrow.
Thank you so much, Chair Castro, for your questions. I want to move into, I guess, one, I want to thank you all for the work you've done in partnership the foundation, and I want to thank them. I want to move into the area of preparation towards doing this work, particularly around polling our community and engaging our community around this work. So I think it's really important to talk about like what does that polling look like? When we did the last set of polls, they were wildly inaccurate in terms of the amount of support we actually garnered from the community. In polling, we never saw more than a 60% support for the referendum.
That's by 82.
When, thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. So how do we get a sense of accuracy in terms of the community support? And are we polling things in comparison? So part of my question is, were we to say, here is a facilities plan that doesn't include sustainability, and it's a far lesser investment in our facilities, would that be more popular in our community than a more expensive plan that gets us to our renewable energy goal? Are we engaged with the community in a way that lets us know that this is a shared value? My personal pulse on this is our community would not have voted for this board if they weren't passionate about sustainability for our schools. However, I do think polls reveal different things than elections. And so I'm curious about what our polling is going to look like, and how we plan to do that, and how inclusive and accurate our polling will be. And I don't know if that's supposed to be to you, but Bob kind of said to you.
Of course he handed it to me. So I can give you, we're just getting into some of the community feedback areas. So I can give you some broad strokes of how we're moving into the polling. Before you do the polling, you gotta have a little bit of sense of this. And so the first part of this is to have some engagements where we're understanding what folks in the community are saying before we can specify polling questions to get more accurate information. So in February, we're planning to have some community sessions in multiple languages to better understand where folks sit with our facilities and with where they want to see things go. Right now, we were also thinking of pairing those sessions with some electronic formatting or electronic feedback. Also to capture different ranges of voices. How that's going to shape and where it's going to look, we're still figuring that part out. We actually are meeting tomorrow to continue that planning. Polling will happen after we have a better sense.
One of the ways I gauge kind of community response to the work we do is that when people don't like what we're doing, they tend to let us know. It seems to be like a more vocal part of this work. I have never heard anyone say, I really hate the investments this district is making in sustainability. My curiosity is, have you? Okay. I do think that there's something to be said for that, right? Because oftentimes when people don't like what we're doing, they do not hold back, right? So the idea that we're not getting backlash or negative feedback around these investments, in some ways, I think should build a little bit of confidence in kind of moving forward in investing in sustainability, and investing in our facilities. I think my last question around this is in terms of partnering with our community to achieve these really ambitious goals around sustainability. What is the appetite for supporting this work beyond going to the taxpayers? And then my next question is really for Bob around the mill rate. I'm done.
So what is the appetite? Can you say that again?
What is the appetite for supporting us in doing this work? What is the appetite for bringing resources to the table to help us do this work?
Within the community?
Yes.
That I can. Yeah.
Okay. How are we planning to gauge that? Or do we have a plan to gauge the kind of support we can bring in independent of tax revenue?
I think that's part of our outreach and input work that we have moving forward. Yeah. I think that's a really good question that we need to ask people.
I'm really excited for the answer to that question. I do think that that's an area that we could be surprised at the level of investment we see philosophically from our communities. My last question is about the mill rate, and I think it's an important question when we're having a budgetary conversation. One of the things that has kept our mill rate more or less stable is that Madison is a growing community. And we are able to spread our investment in schools over more people as we see more people live in Madison, move to Madison, as we see housing come up. Given the landscape you foreshadowed this evening, Bob. I'm curious about the impact on our mill rate moving forward into next year.
It's kind of like two ways to answer that question. Or probably more than two ways to answer that question. Several ways to answer that. I think there's a couple things, and we kind of talked about it last fall when we were looking at the budget that y'all approved in October. And it's kind of pretty early on. I want to get a sense of what the board's comfortable with in terms of tax increase. In the sense of this year, it was $400 increase. Are you comfortable with a $400 increase, or would you be comfortable with a higher dollar increase? Right. I think that allows us to do a couple of things. One, it starts giving me a sense of the mix that we need for operations and facility, right? Because the facility doesn't happen until we let the bonds, which probably won't happen a year and a half into if we get a vote to issue more bonds. So it's this kind of this mix of operations, debt, and what do you think you want to ask the voters to increase, right? So that'll be like the first question I want to get a sense from the board, because clearly we could do more in terms of operating dollars to build a little bit more of a cushion, given it's not going to come around giving us any money anytime soon. And that we have to take care of ourselves. So, and I know how contingent limits are on enrollments, so we get a better sense, or get some actual, are we going back up, or are we leveling out, or are we going down? What are we doing? I'd like to build a little bit more comfort level in terms of our revenues. So, but it really comes down to you telling us what you're comfortable asking for, and then we can meet that.
I think that's a really sophisticated balancing act between what voters are comfortable with and what the board is comfortable with, and how we gauge that ultimately. I think that this community understands that we can afford to invest in our schools, and we can afford to invest in sustainability. I think this community also understands that we cannot afford not to. And so I look forward to the conversations we're going to continue to have, and I hope we're able to contextualize those conversations in the reality of Madison, and what it means for our city to be a growing and thriving community, and the role we play as a district in that. That's it for me.
All right, any other board member questions? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? We are adjourned.